Before I get started on this review, I have to say that some of it is going to get technical. And to those who already own single-action firearms, like the one under review, the technical aspects may seem excessive, or even unneeded, or even unnecessary. But there are those who do not own these revolvers, and also those who might consider owning one of these revolvers. In those cases, the technical aspects could influence their decision regarding the purchase of these replica firearms and make them a more informed consumer. I hope that you enjoy the review, seasoned veteran of these revolvers or not, and thanks for watching in advance. Hello, my friends. It's a great day to be alive, and it's great that you decided to join me for today's chapter in the Range Ronin Chronicles. For those new to the channel, welcome, and to those who have decided to return, welcome back. So, let me get on track with today's review. One little known fact is that I have been wanting to review a 9mm revolver for quite some time, but which one? There are quite a few. There is the Ruger LCR, a 5-shot revolver weighing in at just over 17 ounces unloaded, a 1.8-inch barrel, 6.5 inches in overall length, and an MSRP of $859. We have the Smith & Wesson PC Pro 986, a 7-round capacity revolver with a barrel length of 2.5 inches, an overall length of 7.5 inches, an unloaded weight of 31.4 ounces, and an MSRP of $1,259. In my opinion, one would have to worship the 9mm and revolvers to want this puppy. At a relatively affordable $520, we have the Charter Arms Pitbull, a 5-shot, 2.2-inch barreled revolver weighing in at 22 ounces dry. The Rock Island Armory AL 9.0, weighing in at 32 ounces dry and boasting a 3-inch barrel and a 6-round capacity, would be a nice carry, if you could find one. They are elusive as Joe Biden's grasp on reality, and at an MSRP of $899, one wonders what is so special about this revolver. Finally, we arrive at the Taurus 905, a 2-inch barreled revolver weighing in at 21 ounces dry, a capacity of 5 rounds, utilizes stellar clips for cartridge retention, and has an MSRP of $410. One commonality of all these revolvers is that they are all double-action revolvers, with the Ruger LCR being the double-action only type, while the remaining are double-action, single-action revolvers. A second commonality is that since the 9mm is a rimless cartridge, and with the exception of the Charter Arms Pitbull with its spring-loaded ejection, and the Taurus 905 that uses what is called stellar clips, the remainder all use moon clips for cartridge retention. Now, I am not fond of clips, as they get bent, warped, or are lost easily. Worrying about bent, warped, or missing retention clips is not something a person who wants a 9mm revolver for self-defense or home defense should go through. With this in mind, I usually desire a revolver chambered in .38 Special 357 Magnum that does not use clips of any kind over a 9mm revolver that does. That is not saying that any of the aforementioned revolvers are bad. They are just not my cup of tea. And, yes, they are all short-barreled revolvers, suitable for pocket or other means of concealed carry. They are very handy in that respect. Another commonality is that they are all modern revolvers, and in my mind, are relatively boring. I needed some spice in my life, something different. But did something different actually exist? Yes, it does. So stay tuned. I'm going to tell you all about it. Written in 1874 and published in 1875, All the Way My Savior Leads Me, a popular hymn at the time, written by Fanny Crosby, was sung in churches throughout the land. Also in 1875, E. Remington and Sons introduced the Remington Model 1875 Single Action Army, also known as the Improved Army or Frontier Army Revolver, and which was to compete with the Colt 1873 Single Action Army. The 1875 was the first cartridge revolver for Remington, having manufactured cartridge conversion models of the 1858 Remington, a Remington Beals model revolver that was in service from 1858 to 1873. The 1875 Single Action Army was also the last of this kind of Remington revolver, as the Colt Single Action Army design carried over into the design of the Remington 1888 Transitional Single Action Army and the Remington Model 1890 New Model Army. That, incidentally, was the last revolver made by Remington. The Remington Model 1875 Single Action Army was manufactured from 1875 to 1889. Ordinary citizens, Old West lawmen, and outlaws recognized the sturdy quality of the new Remington revolvers. It was said that Frank James even carried one in .45 caliber for most of his outlaw career. With this short history lesson behind me, let me say that I am enamored by early pre-Civil War, Civil War, and post-Civil War revolvers. I am very fond of them, as I am with flintlock and percussion pistols. I have a mild collection of them. While still missing a few desired pieces, every now and then some unplanned opportunity to own a different piece comes along, and it just must be part of the collection. The Taylors and Company Uberti produced Remington 1875 Outlaw Revolver, chambered in 9mm, and offered in a barrel length of 7.5 inches, is just that piece. With 9mm modern revolvers now in the marketplace, the Uberti 1875 Remington quickly moved to the top of my want list. Of the Uberti Remington reproduction revolvers that I have, the 1858 Percussion, the 1858 Cartridge Conversion chambered in .45 Colt, the 1875 Outlaw, also chambered in .45 Colt, and the Remington Model 1890 New Army Model, that is also chambered in .45 Colt. A 9mm version of the 1875 is a welcome addition to my collection on several counts. As was mentioned, Taylor & Company's Uberti produced Remington 1875 Outlaw revolver, chambered in 9mm, is offered in a barrel length of 7.5 inches, but is also available with a barrel length of 5.5 inches. The version that I have is the 7.5-inch version, and is a length that I prefer as being truer to the original offerings of the 1875 time period, although the shorter 5.5-inch version was available and is a good-looking piece. The Uberti reproductions, although not exact duplicates of the original, provide the same look and feel of the original, but with better metallurgy to shoot modern cartridges using modern powders. When I first began my collection of percussion and cartridge conversion revolvers, the Remington always stood out in my mind as being superior in many ways to the Colt revolvers, any Colt revolver, or pistols as they were called at the time. The Remington revolvers were simply better built than the Colts and far better looking, in my opinion. Even the Remington Model 1890 New Model Army, which was patterned after the 1873 Colt single-action Army, was far more robust than its Colt counterpart. But the Colt single-action Army became the gun that won the West, and in 1890 Remington quit manufacturing revolvers, with the Remington Model 1890 New Model Army being the last of its breed. Let me roll the specifications for the Uberti Remington 1875 Outlaw, then I'll get into the many features of this revolver. Diving into the features of the Uberti Remington 1875 revolver is that, first, the revolver is chambered for the popular 9mm cartridge. Other versions of this reproduction are chambered in 45 Colt and 38 Special 357 Magnum, which gives the 9mm version of this revolver a leg up in the cost of shooting, which means that I will tend to shoot it more than my other Remington reproductions. Because of its distinctness in caliber, I really want to shoot this revolver a lot, and a lower shooting cost will help me do that. Anyway, let's get to the rest of the features. At the muzzle end of the 7.5-inch highly polished round and blued barrel is a high-mounted blade-type front sight that is viewed from the rear of the revolver via a sight channel that is cut into the top strap of the frame. Is the gun barrel heavy? Why, yes it is. The 5.5-inch version of this revolver is more balanced in the hand, but I like and do need that extra sight distance. Obviously, there is no means, except using Kentucky calculations, to adjust for both elevation and windage. The originals, after all, were combat handguns, meant for point-and-shoot aiming, an extension of the shooting hand, if you will. One of the more distinctive features of the Remington 1858 and 1875 revolvers was the underbarrel sail. The sail helped to protect the loading ramrod of the 1858 Remington and then the ejection rod of the 1875, and it serves the same purpose in this version. I would imagine that during the day, the sail on the originals cracked a few skulls. The button-type ejection rod has more than enough length to remove spent 9mm shell casings with authority. The barrel and sail blend very nicely into the steel and blued frame. The frame is a highly done polished blued steel. There is no color case hardened frame or brass trigger housing, as with many Uberti reproductions. There are some imperfections in the bluing, but they are minor and do not detract from the overall feeling and look of the gun. Chambered for the 9mm cartridge, cylinder length has not been shortened to accommodate the cartridge. The cylinder is nicely formed, cut, and fluted. Since this revolver fires a 9mm cartridge, which is rimless, and requires to be head-spaced on the mouth of the cartridge, accommodations are made in each chamber to do so. This also prevents loading longer rounds like the .38 Special and .357 Magnum, as well as trying to load .380 Auto. That is well shorter than the 9mm. .380 Auto can be inserted, but the bottom of the case is below the rear of the cylinder. It would not fire anyway. The cylinder to forcing cone gap is always a consideration, as spent gas and particles will leave this gap at tremendous speed and can, if your fingers or hand be near the vicinity of the flash gap, as it is commonly called, can be seriously damaged. The flash gap on this revolver is between 7 and 8 thousandths of an inch, which is not exceptional, but it is within the safety zone, according to most experts. On the left side of the frame is a spring-loaded base pin screw that, when pushed in, releases the cylinder base pin. Removing the cylinder base pin from the revolver releases the cylinder. More on that in the maintenance segment. At the right rear of the cylinder on the frame is the loading gate that, when opened, allows the insertion or ejection of cartridges. The hammer must be at half cock to allow the cylinder to turn for the loading and unloading process, although the loading gate can be opened at any time. Unlike modern single-action revolvers, like the Ruger SA revolvers, that can be loaded and unloaded without placing the hammer in half cock, this is old school, and Uberti carries on with that old school tradition. Unlike the Colt single-action Army that has 4 distinct clicks in the cocking cycle, there are only 3 clicks to the hammer position: quarter cock, or safe position, half cock, loading and unloading position, and full cock, the fire position. Note that although the quarter cock position is a supposed safety position, I do not trust it, and neither should you. The only carry 5 method is what most SA operators use, and was true in the Old West as it is today. The only time a 6-gun was truly loaded with 6 rounds was when one was getting battle ready. Even at the range, and even with new models of the single-action revolver, like the Ruger, I still only load 5 rounds for safety's sake. The hammer spur is wide and textured for a secure purchase by the thumb when cocking and decocking a revolver. The rear of the frame, while somewhat mimicking that of the 1873 Colt single-action Army, is possibly a trade-off between the Colt and the Smith & Wesson Schofield revolver, with its set-back grip design. Note that the grip frame does position the hand a bit further back from the trigger than does the 1873 Colt single-action Army, while the angle of the grip is like the Colt single-action Army. Personally, I like the setback and angle, as my hand and my shooting finger does not feel as bunched up when I shoot as with the Colt. Trigger reach, with the hammer fully cocked, is about 3 1/4 inch. What the grip frame does is allow you to get a very high hold on the grip, and that allows you to get closer to the hammer for easy cocking and decocking. The grip handles are nicely shaped walnut with the usual Uberti finish that is not as glossy as with other Uberti reproductions that I have. except for the Old West model 1873 Colt, and I prefer a more satin finish over a high gloss finish. The grip is a two-piece affair, and are satisfyingly matched to the grip frame, which is of a nicely blued steel front and rear, as is the trigger guard. The top front of the grip is indented. With a high hold on this revolver, the shooting finger just seems to fall into place on the trigger, regardless of which hand is doing the holding. There is enough grip surface to get all of the fingers of the shooting hand on with a high hold. Grip takes a bit to get used to, but is very nice once you do. The trigger guard is rounded and smooth and can accommodate a glove shooting hand with the hammer cocked. Although as sensitive as the trigger is, I would not recommend wearing gloves when shooting it. The trigger with the hammer cocked is very close to the rear of the trigger guard, and I will tell you up front, do not place your finger on the trigger unless you intend to pull it. The trigger pull weight on this revolver would make 1911 operators envious, coming in at around 2 pounds 6.5 ounces. It is clean and precise, which demands that you keep the trigger finger away from the trigger until you are ready to pull it. The overall action with this revolver is smooth and calculated. As you begin to roll the hammer back, the cylinder unlocks and begins its rotation as the hand moves against the ratchet. As was mentioned, there is only 3 clicks with this revolver: quarter cock, half cock, and full cock. Pulling the full cock is quite long. Once achieved, pulling the trigger is very satisfying. And speaking about pulling the trigger, I feel that I have pulled as much as I need to here. Performing maintenance on the Uberti 1875 Remington is fairly simple, as there is only one thing to remove: the cylinder. Obviously, a safety check is performed first to ensure that the firearm is unloaded and safe. Open the loading gate. Pull the hammer to the half-cock position. Rotate the cylinder and inspect each chamber. Ensure that each chamber is empty. If each chamber is not empty, unload the chamber or chambers to ensure that the firearm is safe to work on. Disassembly is performed with the loading gate open and the hammer at half cock. Push the cylinder rod lock button inward. With the cylinder rod lock pushed in, pull the cylinder rod out from the front of the frame. The cylinder pin will stop when it is in the most forward position. Using a clockwise motion, remove the cylinder from the right side of the frame. As far as cleaning, inspection, and lubrication, I am first going to let you hear the offering from Uberti, and then I'm going to expound on a couple of things.
To clean your revolver, use a wood, aluminum, or brass cleaning rod. Do not use steel, a brass bristle brush, and patches that are correctly sized to the caliber of your revolver. Use a good quality cleaning solution to scrub each cylinder bore and barrel bore. Always brush all the way through the bore. Never try to reverse directions while the brush is actually in the barrel or chamber. After scrubbing, run clean patches through the bore and chambers until they come out clean. Thereafter, completely, but lightly, oil the entire revolver. You will find that the oil will nicely color the one-piece grip of your revolver over the years, and it will develop and retain a soft patina glow. Use a good quality brass polish on the back strap and trigger guard. These high-quality solid brass parts will tarnish, but it is easily removed with any good quality brass polish.
With that said from Uberti, let me add this. Pay close attention to the chambers of the cylinder when cleaning. Remember that the 9mm round is rimless. This means that it headspaces on the mouth of the cartridge. Within each cylinder chamber is a ridge that the mouth of the cartridge rests against. This ridge must be kept clean of debris that could affect the height of the cartridge at the back of the cylinder at the recoil shield. If the base of the cartridge is too high, it might cause cylinder binding, which puts wear on the hand as it pushes the cylinder around for the next round. You might notice in the image that I am showing that not all cartridge bases are against the rear of the cylinder. Is that a concern? Most likely it is not. The specified case length of the 9mm cartridge is 19.15mm or 0.754 inch. The base of the cartridge is 1.27mm or 0.05 inch. This leaves approximately 17.88mm or 0.7 inch of the total case length to be hidden in each chamber in order for the base of the cartridge to be exposed at the rear of the cylinder, against the primer of which strikes the firing pin. I measured each chamber of the revolver and came up with these figures, as measured from my digital caliper. When the firing pin strikes the primer of the cartridge, the hammer is forced slightly to the rear by the recoil force of the cartridge against the firing pin. No cause for concern there, that is normal, but there are two things that you need to be aware of. First being that burnt powder and debris could build up on the face of the cartridge top within the chamber, which would make the new round loaded into that chamber sit higher. Over a long period of shooting the revolver, this buildup at the cartridge top could cause slight binding of the cylinder. I'll talk about the second concern when I get to the range segment. The cylinder in this revolver is hand-fitted to its frame with precision, and that is a close fit. While the cylinder can be removed and reinstalled easily, care must always be taken to avoid damage. Do not force the cylinder out of or into the frame when installing the cylinder, and once the cylinder finds its place within the frame, it will move in easily, but it may take some patience to get to that point. Forget what you saw in the movie Pale Rider with Clint Eastwood. That 1858 Remington New Army conversion revolver that he used during the last gunfight, where he quickly exchanged the cylinder with another, was a prop gun that was specially set up to allow quick insertion of the cylinder. In real life, it is not that easy. With the hammer at half cock and the loading gate open, insert the cylinder from the right side of the frame. The edges at the rear of the cylinder must align with the recoil shield of the frame before you attempt to move the cylinder rod to the rear. When you push the cylinder base pin, make sure that the base pin catch snaps back into place. I test to see if it is in the correct position by checking for free movement of the plunger. It should move free when pressed and return under its own spring pressure. Well, that's it for maintenance. I do believe I hear a range calling me, an Uberti 1875 Remington. So, let's get to it. Operating a single-action revolver takes some finesse, but yet requires some authority. To load the Uberti 1875 Outlaw in 9mm flavoring, first, point the muzzle in a safe direction. Pull the hammer back to the half-cock position. Open the loading gate. Insert one round into a chamber. This is the load one part of the rhyme. rotate the cylinder to the right until the next empty chamber is showing. This chamber is to remain empty. This is the skip 1 part of the rhyme. Continue to rotate the cylinder to the next third chamber. Load the third chamber and then each of the next chambers so that you have loaded 4 consecutive chambers. This is the load 4 more step. Close the loading gate. This is the close the door part of the rhyme. Place the thumb of the shooting or support hand directly on top of the hammer spur. While holding down on the hammer spur, press the trigger. The hammer will release. Use pressure on the hammer to slowly allow it to go forward into its rest position. The revolver is now in a safe attitude. While decocking the revolver has been somewhat covered, I'll cover it specifically in detail next. Of course, we are assuming that the revolver is fully cocked. While the safest time to decock a single-action revolver, or a double-action revolver that is in single-action mode, is when the chambers are empty, or after all rounds have been fired. But we all know that sometimes the hammer must be lowered on a live round. This is where I insert a warning. Make sure your hands and fingers are dry, and such things as gloves or bandages do not prevent you from maintaining a firm grip on the hammer. First, make sure the muzzle of the firearm is pointing in a safe direction. Then, pull the hammer back slightly from the full cock position, and, while maintaining a firm rearward pressure on the hammer spur with your thumb, carefully pull the trigger and maintain trigger pressure so that the hammer can continue to move slowly more forward past the half-cock loading position. While you can use the cowboy method of decocking the hammer, I find it safer to use the thumb of the support hand to support the hammer, simply for the fact that it keeps the hand away from the flash gap or anywhere forward of the flash gap. This may not be as cool as using the cowboy method, but it is safer. Once clear of the half-cock position, which is approximately 1/2 inch between the frame and the hammer, carefully release the pressure on the trigger and continue to slowly move the hammer forward until it clicks into the quarter cock position, approximately 1/4 inch between the frame and the hammer. Note that you will not hear a click as the hammer moves through the half-cock loading or unloading position. If you somehow stop the hammer at the half-cock notch position, you must pull the hammer to the rear again to engage the full cock notch. Then repeat the decocking process. Never attempt to pull the trigger when the revolver is in the half-cock position, for the reason mentioned previously. Damage to the revolver could occur. As a side note, whenever I am showing a single-action revolver to someone, after ensuring that it is cleared and safe, I always ask them if they are familiar with these old-style single-action revolvers. I always tell them to decock the hammer using the thumb to prevent the hammer from falling on an empty chamber, because they, invariably, cock the hammer and pull the trigger, or try to pull the trigger from the half-cock position. Just protecting my investment, that's all. Nothing personal. To safely unload, move the hammer to the rear to the half-cock loading position, and open the loading gate fully. Use the left hand to support the firearm. Using the right hand on the ejector rod, located under the barrel, push or pull the rod toward the cylinder to push the live cartridge or empty case out of the chamber, and through the open loading gate. Allow the ejection rod to return to its normal position. Rotate the cylinder to see the next chamber, and push or pull the ejection rod again to empty that chamber. Continue this process until all chambers are empty. You must operate the ejector rod its full length in each chamber to ensure complete cartridge ejection. Once each chamber has been unloaded, slowly rotate the cylinder one more complete revolution. Take care to ensure each of the 6 chambers are now completely empty. Then, and only then, should you close the loading gate. Then pull the hammer completely to the rear to the full cock position and decock the revolver using the instructions that I went through previously. While I did not expect issues during the range session, the second of two issues, which I talked about in the maintenance segment, need to be addressed. The second issue that has occurred, even in modern 9mm revolvers using wound clips or not, is bullet setback of cartridges remaining in the cylinder. This bullet setback, caused by recoil of the rounds being fired, increases case pressure of the rounds not yet fired. In most cases, the setback is not significant enough to warrant concern, but does exist to one degree or another when firing a rimless cartridge in a revolver. Uberti firearms are tested at 3 times the established case pressure of ammunition, so I doubt if there would be any issues with the firearms. With that said, I would not explore putting 9mm plus P ammunition through this revolver, due to the increased case pressures of those rounds. But that is just me. With all this said, let's catch up with how the Uberti 1875 Remington and I are working together at the range. Now, let's get to my final impressions of the Uberti 1875 Remington chambered in 9mm. The Uberti 1875 Remington in 9mm was destined for my hand. While it is not an exact copy of the original, it is close enough for my hobby of collecting selected reproductions of revolvers from 1836 to 1890, with only the Colt Patterson escaping my grasp. Colt, Smith & Wesson, and Remington all have a place at the table. The 1875 Remington Outlaw, as it is called by Taylors & Company, brings that nostalgic look and feel into modern-day manufacturing, where an offshoot like this one in 9mm can feel right at home with my 1858 New Army conversion and 1875 Remington Improved Army, chambered in .45 Colt. I truly love shooting my .45 Colt reproduction revolvers, but the cost of .45 Colt ammunition makes it less pleasurable. This 9mm version makes shooting a bit more pleasant on both the hand and the wallet. As mentioned earlier, the 1875 Remington is offered in 5.5-inch and 7.5-inch barreled versions, either of which you just might enjoy if you are ready to take a step back in time, relax, and shoot what is used to be fighting handguns of the 19th century, or at least reproductions of. The original 1875 Remington had an effective range of 50 yards, at which most were sighted for. They, however, were effective out to further distances in skilled hands. The 9mm, however, can be effective out to 100 yards, depending on the ammunition and how much oomph it has left at that distance. Typically, the 9mm can be effective at ranges between 75 and 85 yards. More typically, the 9mm cartridge will be used at much shorter distances, but its effectiveness is left up to science and what is being shot with it. Coming to the end of this journey, let's take a last look at the Uberti 1875 Remington, chambered in 9mm. Well, once again I have come to the end of another chapter in the Range Ronin Chronicles. I hope to still be here in the future, and I hope that you will travel this journey with me. Until we meet again, stay vigilant, stay armed, and stay safe out there.